as the pound sterling, which had been the world reserve currency for 100 years, in 1944, towards the end of World War II, at a conference at Bretton Woods, essentially, the pound gave way to the dollar. And all of a sudden, this upstart currency, the US dollar, became the world reserve currency. There is no law written in granite that it has to stay that way. It's not out of the question that we'll move to a cryptocurrency world. But I think it's more likely that, at least in the interim, there'll be either a BRICS type currency, Brazil, Russia, Iran, China. Those countries will come up with something. Maybe it'll be the Chinese currency, but I think it's very possible that the American dollar will cease to be the world reserve currency. And if and when that happens, people who are holding Bitcoin will probably be very happy.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Source, your number one place and ultimate destination for everything Bitcoin. I'm your host, Dadu, and today we have a truly special guest joining us, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, widely known as America's Rabbi. Rabbi Lapin is a world-renowned spiritual leader, captivating speaker, and best-selling author with a unique perspective on faith and finance. Today, we will be discussing his life story, exploring the intriguing connections between Judaism and Bitcoin, and diving into the God Bless Bitcoin documentary. Rabbi Lapin, welcome to the Bitcoin Source.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes. So, Rabbi, you've had a fascinating journey as both a spiritual leader and a public speaker. Can you tell us about your early life and what shaped your path into becoming a rabbi?
Well, Aldo, I have to tell you that from the youngest age, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt where other kids spoke about what they may want to be or I knew for absolute sure that the one thing I never was going to be was a rabbi, because my father was, and my great-grandfather was, and my great-uncle was, and I thought, no, I would not have any interest in doing this. But sometimes things work out differently, and I discovered that if you don't pay any attention, when the Lord speaks to you, if you ignore it, you'll get whacked. So I got whacked a couple of times, and little by little I found my destiny. And you know, in Hebrew, the word rabbi just means teacher, and so it's somebody who has been trained very diligently in the meanings of the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, and that served me in very good stead, because one of the things that happened was that I found myself lecturing to Christian groups around the world, in China, across the United States, in Canada, in Africa, in Switzerland, in the United Kingdom. And I found that the one question that audiences tend to ask me more than anything else was, why are Jews disproportionately good with money? It doesn't mean that there are no poor Jews, but it did mean that out of 400 people on the Forbes list of the wealthiest people in America that Forbes magazine published every year, given the small Jewish population in America, only about 1.5%, there should have been about 6 Jews out of the 400, but there were always about 50 or 100. When people ask me, why are Jews so disproportionately good with money, I realized I didn't have the answer. And so I explored that very carefully. And I interviewed hundreds of people who'd had a lifetime of experience doing business with Jews. I even looked into the possibility that maybe Jews just keep ripping people off. Maybe they're dishonest, because some dictionaries use the word Jew as a synonym for stealing or robbing. So eventually, when it became clear to me that it wasn't that, I had to find another explanation. You know, what could account for it? And at the end of many years of work and research on this, it became clear to me that it was ancient Jewish wisdom as depicted in the Hebrew text of Scripture that lays out many of the principles and truths that people need in order to succeed in business and in money. And it was that simple. When I discovered that, it was clear, and I started writing books like thou shalt prosper, the 10 commandments for making money, and business secrets from the Bible, and most recently and most importantly, the holistic you, integrating all parts of your life with your finances. And so that's what linked my work as a rabbi, as well with my work as a coach, a business coach, a life coach, a consultant for business, teaching and lecturing on the principles of creating wealth, and it became a very wonderful period of my life. I loved finding ways to help people make more money, because once I realized what the secrets of making money are, it becomes a good thing for everybody. And so I feel very privileged to have most of my working time dedicated to helping people make more money. You see, the thing about being a Christian, and I'm not Christian, so I'm speaking as an outsider, but from my many Christian friends and brothers and sisters, I've learned that being a Christian means that at some very specific moment, particularly of your adult life, you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you become a Christian at that moment. There is nothing that makes you Jewish other than birth. Being born to a Jewish mother means I'm Jewish. And that means that if I were to meet a Christian who said to me, I'm an atheist, then I would say back to him, you're either not a Christian or you're not an atheist, but you can't be both. Because acceptance of Christianity means that you're not an atheist. But if I meet a Jewish person who says I'm an atheist, there's nothing much I can say, because he says my mother was Jewish, so I'm Jewish, and I don't believe in God, so I'm an atheist. And that means that the Jewish people are really divided into two. There are those who believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then there are those who don't. And they disagree on a lot of things. So right now, I can tell you, we're on the eve of an election in the United States of America, and I can tell you that about half the Jewish people in America are voting for one side, and half the Jewish people in America are voting for the other side. So it would be nice it would be nice if all of us Jews got on and we all agreed with each other and we tried to advance one another's interests and take care of one another. I'm afraid that's not true, and it's a pipe dream. I wish it was true. But the fact is that in my public positions on business, finance, and money, I get as much hate mail from Jews as I do from non-Jews.
So did the pursuit for you to move from South Africa to the U.S., was that was in no way financial or trying to chase the American dream at all, was it?
No, it was hard. It cost me to come to America.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I came because I saw an exciting country.
Wow. That's crazy. And one thing that I do want to say is that, I think what you're doing that might actually help to connect that issue is your kind of insurrection into Bitcoin. And I think that just watching the documentary, seeing you just on national television, I was always curious to know, like, what was your introduction to finance and economics? And how do you think that shaped your interest into emerging technologies like Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I'll answer your question in the reverse order, if you don't mind. My interest in cryptocurrency in general and Bitcoin started off because in recent history, in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, Jews tried to flee Germany. And then when Germany invaded Poland, they tried to flee Poland. And when Germany invaded Russia, they tried to flee Russia. And in all those cases, those who did flee and those who got out arrived penniless wherever they landed. Some of them went to South America, some went to Africa, some went to Israel, some came to North America, some came to the United States, some came to Canada, some went to Mexico. But in all those cases, they arrived penniless because they couldn't take their money with them. And I think you see where I'm going on this. Had there been cryptocurrency available, the idea that they could have come away, they could have been searched at the border when they were thrown out of their countries, they could have been searched at the border and the guards would have found nothing. And yet when they arrived in their new country, they could have opened their digital wallet and settled in. 1948 through 1950, over 1 million Jews were thrown out of Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, thrown out. When the State of Israel was founded in 1948, for the next few years, Arab countries threw out and turned 1 million Jews into exile, into refugees. And they came to Israel, but they had to leave their assets behind them. 90, the King of England threw all the Jews out of England. And they went to Spain and they went to Holland and they arrived penniless. So clearly, my interest in cryptocurrency was, wouldn't it be amazing if everybody, but particularly Jews who have a history of being turned into refugees, wouldn't it be great if they could actually have some of their assets in cryptocurrency so that it's safe wherever they are? So that's what started my interest in that. My interest in business and finance more generally was this. It was the realization that money is actually a spiritual reality, not a physical reality. I should just stress that when I say a spiritual reality, that doesn't mean I'm not talking about religion. Spiritual and religion are not the same thing. Religion has to do with God. Spiritual is anything that cannot be measured. And so a saxophone can be measured. I can weigh it. I can measure how long it is. I can tell that it's made out of brass. But a tune cannot be measured. There's no way to measure a tune in a lab. A tune is spiritual. A saxophone is physical. And so is there any way of measuring money? Well, no. You can measure the weight of a metallic disc, and you can measure the size of a strip of colored paper in your wallet. But that doesn't tell you the value. The value is spiritual. There is no way to measure it. Yes, I know it says $10 on there, or it might say $100 on there, but let's not make any mistake. Imagine if your grandfather hid a can in the yard with $1,000 in it, $100 bills. When he hid that, that would have been enough to buy yourself a nice car. Today, $1,000 lets you make a couple of trips to the grocery store and you're done. And so what's happened? You're still holding those same pieces of paper, but the value has vanished. And the only way to find out the value is to interact with other people. And so I might come to you and say, hey, I've got $1,000 and I'd like to buy your car. And you laugh at me and you say, that's not going to work. What you're holding in your pocket is just not enough to buy my car. Okay, well, now I'm getting a bit of an idea as to the value of that currency. And so realizing that money is spiritual, that it cannot be measured, it can only be discovered by interactions with other human beings, that was when it began to be interesting to me. And it also began to be interesting to me that one of the big differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament is that the Old Testament is absolutely filled with rules and regulations about money. Just a lot of information about money. And then finally, I discovered, again in my Bible studies, that in chapter 2 of Genesis, when God says it's not good for man to be alone, he's not just talking about Adam meeting Eve. He's talking about a general statement that human beings do not do well alone. And sure enough, that is, of course, true. Because if you or I lived alone in complete isolation, we'd have to be working 24/7, just trying to survive. We'd have to plant stuff and harvest it, and meanwhile I've got to try and make some clothing out of wool that I cut off my sheep. But I don't have a minute to spare. But if we trade with one another, if one of us specializes in growing sheep, and the other one specialized in growing wheat. And we trade. We're both going to have bread. We're both going to have wool. And we're going to do much better than we were alone. And so God says, I don't like people to be alone. And I'm going to provide two incentives for people to not be alone. One is sex, male-female relationships, and that's a powerful incentive to not be alone. And the other one is money and bread, meaning bread as a metaphor for money. Like, can you lend me some bread, or you got any dough on you? That expression is biblical in origin. And so I was very much drawn to understanding finance and to studying business, realizing that this was apparently part of God's plan for human economic interaction. Money is a real thing, and it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yes, and Rabbi, I know there's a lot of vacillation between the Christian text and the Jewish text, and in the Jewish text, there's always this strong emphasis on ethics and values in finance. How do you think these principles align with Bitcoin's decentralized nature and its focus on empowering individuals?
Well, it does that beautifully, of course, because theoretically, at least, nobody else needs to know about your precise holdings. Now, obviously, in most modern societies, governments are absolutely not going to allow an underground economy to develop in Bitcoin without their knowledge. And so governments around the world have made it their business to be able to follow Bitcoin transactions. So a lot of that advantage obviously is no longer there. Not that it really ever was, but the idea can interact in a consensual act of trade, and that this can be done reliably and with full security is a wonderful thing, because one of the ideas that's very much a part of ancient Jewish wisdom, and a lot of people don't know this, Dario, a lot of people think that the only way to succeed in business is to pull the wool over the other person's eyes, to fool them, to not let them know what you're doing. But the idea that business is best conducted in an atmosphere of full transparency, people have to learn. It doesn't come naturally. The natural thing is, I'm going to sort of keep you from knowing what I'm doing. No, I don't do. I want you to know everything I'm doing. And so when it comes to the transaction itself, it's so great that there is clarity. There is a ledger system, a fantastically brilliant ledger system that makes it virtually impossible to not pay when you should be paid, or to claim you weren't paid. It's all verifiable. It's all right there in front of you.
And Rabbi, a lot of people look to religious texts for guidance on financial matters, right? Are there any specific teachings in the Torah or the Talmud that resonate with those principles of Bitcoin and financial sovereignty?
Just the idea, yes, the idea that a person should have some of his money in real estate, but he should also have some of his money in the most negotiable, movable, reliable form available. And today we know what that is.
Yeah, for sure. That makes perfect sense. And Rabbi, I want to talk about, I think the burning question here, what people really know you for, or at least on the Bitcoin side of things, is God Bless Bitcoin, the documentary. The film has sparked a lot of conversations about faith and digital currency. What drew you to participate in this project, and what message do you hope viewers take away from it?
Well, I was very eager when I was invited. I didn't hesitate. I was very eager to participate, just because the more transactions, the more financial interaction, the more prosperity and the more peace. Countries that trade with one another don't go to war with one another. Individuals who do business with one another are friendly with one another. One of the reasons that I love going to Jewish weddings is because I like asking people, I go up to as many people as I can, without making myself just completely obnoxious. And I say, so, Are you related to the bride? You're related to the groom's side? What are you doing at the wedding? And some people say, yeah, I'm a cousin of the bride, or I'm an uncle of the groom. But the majority of people all say the same thing. I'll tell you what it is. The majority of people say to me, I've been doing business with the bride's father for 20 years. Well, I've been in partnership with the groom's uncle for the last 10 years. Yeah, doing business with people produces relationships in the same way that the other way around, relationships make it possible to do business. And what you need is a friction-free form of exchange. A friction-free form of exchange. And that's really in our day, that is nowhere to be found more reliably than in Bitcoin.
Yes, I have to agree with that as well, Rabbi. And I think that right now, in the way that the ecosystem is set up, you're seeing a lot of people kind of fighting between this broader conversation around morality and financial responsibility in the modern world. And when you look at political candidates, and it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left, they're always questioning where's his tax returns? Where's her tax returns? What are they doing with their money? Where is these funds being allocated? And I think that Bitcoin is kind of really helping people have that open transparency that you talk about when you mention businesses kind of being transparent on their endeavors and showing the customer, showing the user that, hey, this is what we're doing. We're being honest with our business, and we hope that you buy in and support us.
Right. And talking of politicians, as you were, I find it very interesting that certainly in the United States and in several other countries I've visited, in the United States, politicians try their hardest to pretend to be poor. They all talk of how poor they were. They grew up poor. They lie. A lot of them are lying. And there's only one candidate who I find very refreshing in the current election because he doesn't pretend to be poor. He enjoys being rich. But it really irritates me when politicians start talking about they grew up poor. It's not true most of the time. Why do they do that? Because they believe that having money is evidence that you're a bad person. They believe the only way you got money was through being a greedy, immoral person who took it from other people. And that's a ghastly, appalling belief that makes it very, very difficult for anybody to do well. Because when you get indoctrinated, and advertising is indoctrination is advertising, it's possible to persuade people. And when you persuade people that making money is bad, then they are fatally handicapped in the process of making money. Because nobody can really succeed at any activity that deep in his heart he considers to be morally reprehensible. And so I believe it to be a very important part of my job, part of my mission, part of my ministry, if you like, is to help people understand that making money is a moral and dignified occupation. And it is probably the least harmful activity you can engage in.
Yeah, because I just had a thought when you were saying that I do agree, but at the same time, I feel like the politicians are utilizing what the crowd is doing. And we're all aware of how powerful the Jewish community can be as far as voting and having money and having kind of like an established control of certain industries. Do you believe that the religious communities like the Jewish congregations are kind of swaying the politicians to not talk about having wealth and to kind of come off as if they're poor because it's kind of frowned upon in the culture, and they're kind of, working their way into being, submissive to the certain political structures that they're kind of getting funding and political gain from?
Yeah. I don't think it is, because the one thing that most Jews are comfortable with is money. They don't see a problem with it. You see, and that's again because of the spiritual physical question. If money is physical, well, one of the rules of anything physical is that it can only be in one place at a time. And so if you've got $100, there must be a whole lot of people around who are short $10 each. But if And that's how it would be if money is like cakes, right? If I've got 10 cakes in front of me, then there's probably a bunch of maybe 8 or 9 hungry people out there who don't have cake. But if money is much more like a tune, well, you and I can have a tune at the same time. We can even give it to 10 other people. We don't have anything less. We're just living in a more musical world. So Jews are a very small part of the population, but they are very strong on the message that making money is a good thing. But there's another part of the population, and that is the population that you find in the university environment, the academic and the intellectual community. And those people, for the most part, take a very socialistic view, which is that rich people are bad. And that's why you'll hear politicians say things like, the rich must pay their fair share. Well, that's a nice sounding phrase, but wouldn't it be nice if they would define for us how much money makes you rich? They just say the rich. So today they'll come for you and tomorrow they'll come for me because it's not defined. And so to say the rich must pay their fair share is very difficult. The other difficult thing about it is what's fair? How much is a fair share? And so there's this general hostility towards the rich based on this idea that poor people are virtuous and rich people are bad. And this is a tremendously destructive thing. When young people come through school hearing that from their teachers, they become handicapped financially in later life because they never forget that lesson. I don't want to be a horrible person and make money. Truth is, the only group of people who can get money without giving something in return is the government. It's called taxation. But if you and I, as private people, want to get more money, the only way we can persuade people, there's two ways we can get people to give us their money. The one is to use a 357 Magnum revolver, point it at them and say, your money or your life. And the only other way is to give them something of more value so that they buy whatever it is we're selling. And that's how a prosperous, peaceful economy thrives.
Nice, nice. So, Rabbi, I have a couple more questions for you. So,
Sure.
with your deep knowledge of both theology and economics, where do you see Bitcoin's future in a world where it's constantly shifting due to economic and political turmoil?
Well, the only thing that I can predict is change.
Uh-huh.
The only thing I can predict is that tomorrow is going to be different from yesterday. And being flexible today means that we can adapt for tomorrow. And so making sure that some of our assets are easily reachable and easily negotiable, I think is valuable advice for each and every one of us. And one of the ways of keeping money accessible and reachable is obviously through Bitcoin. That's one way to do it. Where things go in the future is very unreliable. I mean, nobody knows, and anyone who claims to know is a charlatan. Obviously, as we move along, as Bitcoin becomes perhaps more of a medium of exchange and less of an investment commodity, its predictability will improve, because right now we don't know what the value of Bitcoin is relative to other currencies. But eventually, this should become clearer as time goes by. But certainly the importance of Bitcoin seems to be fixed, at least for the foreseeable future. I see it. In my view, I think the dollar is losing power. It's not losing value at the moment, and there's some technical reasons for that. But I think it's very possible that just as the pound sterling, which had been the world reserve currency for 100 years, in 1944, towards the end of World War II, at a conference at Bretton Woods, essentially, the pound gave way to the dollar. And all of a sudden, this upstart currency, the US dollar, became the world reserve currency. there is no law written in granite that it has to stay that way. It's not out of the question that we'll move to a cryptocurrency world. But I think it's more likely that, at least in the interim, there'll be either a BRICS type currency, Brazil, Russia, Iran, China. Those countries will come up with something. Maybe it'll be the Chinese currency, but I think it's very possible that the American dollar will cease to be the world reserve currency. And if and when that happens, people who are holding Bitcoin will probably be very happy.
Yes, and last question for you, Rabbi, in the context of what you just said of the people that may be concerned about the dollar failing, but they're people of faith, and those are people that are curious about Bitcoin but unsure. What would you tell them to keep them in alignment with their values and belief, and also kind of embracing this new technology that is Bitcoin? What advice would you give them?
Well, I wouldn't advise anybody specifically financially, because part of independence as an independent human being is that everybody has to make their own decisions, and everyone should make their own decisions. I don't want the government to tell you the truth, I'd rather not have money taxed out of my payroll to be given to Social Security. I'd rather take care of my Social Security myself. I would much rather that. But I'm very big on people taking responsibility for their money themselves. And so I think people should seek advice. I think you should speak to people in many, many different areas, including Bitcoin, and take advice and try to understand it and try to integrate that into an investment strategy that works for the season of life you are in. Obviously, a 25-year-old is looking at investment differently from a 65-year-old.
Yes, solid advice. Thank you, Rabbi. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Bitcoin Source, and thank you for sharing your wisdom on how faith and Bitcoin intersect. I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot of value from this conversation. For everyone tuning in, be sure to check out God Bless Bitcoin, the documentary, and continue following the Bitcoin Source for more insightful interviews.
And can we have people visit my website as well?
Yes.
RabbiDanielLapin.com.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it. And everybody check out the website. Once again, Rabbi, thank you for this conversation. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
You are most welcome. I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you. And again, I thank you very much for adjusting to my schedule. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.